right, welcome back. Okay. All right, so DG, your mic was on before you took a break.
Yes, so Victor, what we said is that we have gone through 3 levels of reforms. The first one was basically we were pushing for independence, we were pushing for economic reforms and all that. And once we gained that, then we came forward and of course with a president that came from colonial times, who sometimes most of them continue to think like the colonial governments so that they can continue with the government, ended up becoming a dictator of sorts. But the difference is that at least Moi's time we had a very well expanded educational opportunities for this country. But what we were fighting, the biggest problem was the one-party system, the de facto one-party state, which really, if you dissented, you are criminalized. And so there was that general movement, and that's how we ended up with Sabasaba. So Sabasaba, what it has given to Kenya today is multi-party system, which now has given us the democratic space, the institutions we have, and all these things. But 35 years later, a lot of the aspirations of the Sabasaba movement has not been achieved. However, did we achieve something? Yes, we achieved a lot of things. We got the constitution of 2010. We had a transition from the one party, KANU to NAC to multi-party system. We have expanded our institutions. A lot of things have happened, but the people have not still, especially the younger generation, have not felt their government.
But where's the gap?
And the gap is really, economics.
Civic education or something?
Civic education, economics, suppression of expression in a way. So a lot of the things that were there then are still here with us. And of course, I agree with my colleague Daniel that we have gained so much as a country, and that is out there in plain sight. But there are very important fundamental things that have led, a lot of uprisings across, like you said, globally, across the continent of Africa. Tunisia, what happened? It was the youth. Hong Kong, similar things. South Africa recently, in 2015, I think it was the school fees protest. But one small thing triggers these protests, and then it expands into other things. For example, in our case, it was just the finance bill, the tax on bread and fuel and things like that. Now it started, all the other things that people were feeling now has tried to come out to give momentum to this kind of protests. For example, ethnic exclusion in jobs, in the corruption, police brutality, all these things now are giving a lot of energy to the protest. And I think that is where we need now to look at. We have tried a lot of things, including police reform. Somehow it's not working. We have tried to fight corruption for many years, even before, even during Moi's time, in a way. We have tried to improve that. It's not really where it is supposed to be. In fact, with the coming of devolution, maybe it has expanded. And the other thing we have gained in this country because of Sabasaba is the devolved government, which Kenyans are really enjoying, where a lot of services now are far much provided at the grassroots level than when we were centralized. So these gains are very huge, and some of them we got them over a period of time. They were building on each other. Now, we can lose all these things in a matter of a second. Everything can go, just disappear like that. I have an analogy from Somalia. When Siad Barre was the president, there was similar movement. Of course, this one, he was removed by some sort of guys who were armed. But those guys, after Siad Barre was chased, asked themselves, so what? So when people asked them, they said, all our agenda was just to get rid of Siad Barre. We never even asked who will take over thereafter. Now, that is what's happening in this country right now. The president said the other day that, so you say Ruto must go where? And what happens after that? Really, do we have a plan for that? If that happens, we are not hoping that will happen, but what if it happens? So what? We will go into an anarchy, the Somali way, or the Tunisia way, or the many other way. So our young boys and girls out there, while they are right in terms of pushing for reforms, in terms of pushing for changes, in terms of better policing, culture. Again, they must understand that we are at the, we are at the age of going into an anarchy, like Sudan is right now, like Congo is, and many other countries that are struggling. From where we are as tigers and the leaders of African continent.
Yeah.
So I think protests are right, and they should do so peacefully. Right. Unfortunately, Victor, is that there are certain groups of people who are pseudo-liberal activists, this group of the recently founded party, what is it called, Democratic something? The one for Wamunyoro.
DCP?
DCP. There's this group now, whenever the Gen Zs, and Gen Zs generally are very peaceful from the beginning. They're generally, of course, as you have said, decentralized, and they say they are leaderless. But at some point, if this movement has to give us some outcome, and they have to give us some institutional outcome, there has to be some cohesion and some leadership. You can't just remain leaderless, decentralized. You don't know who you're talking to, and then you have this massive impact on the country, toppling an entire government, and then suddenly everybody is just a leader. So this is not sustainable.
Okay. When you look at, thank you for that, DG, but how do we harness this democratic space that we are enjoying today, Daniel? Because the gains that we've made, the DJ said that it's just a small spark and it's all gone. So how do we harness it? Because it seems that we are really enjoying that space so much.
Absolutely. So just like the DG says, these gains are there, we have made them, and they're very fragile, very fragile. And so it's very easy, just like he said about what led us to here today, 25th of June 2024, when these young people were protesting against the finance bill. And at that time, and this is one of the reasons why I think we need to cultivate trust and ethical leadership. And this country, there's some, in a democracy, any political science will tell you, that separation of powers is a very, very fundamental aspect of democracy. Where we have the legislature, we have the executive, and we have the judiciary. So this country must learn to ensure that that separation of power works. So 2024, when the MPs, members of parliament, passed that finance bill, you cannot tell me that they did not know that the people were complaining about the finance bill. They know, and they pushed it through. They pushed it through. So they know, and that's why for me, I blame our members of parliament for where we are today. Because then they are not, we usually say that leaders, especially the members of parliament, the elected leaders, must always learn to stand with the people. So when the people speak, you need to listen to what the people are saying. And then you are able to advise the other arms of government accordingly. So the MPs were supposed to exercise their role of representation and advise the executive that this finance bill as it is not good, the people are complaining. If they were able to listen to the people and arrest that situation, I think we would not have had that Gen Z revolt, because it ended up going overboard, and then the president again had to deal with it, had to clean the mess that the members of parliament started. So he did away with that finance bill. So this is the genesis of our problem. So members of parliament must start learning to listen to the people. Let's listen to these young guys. And another situation where we were almost having a problem was yesterday, where we see, I think the Esther Passaris coming up with what she thinks is a solution. That is coming up with new laws to try and solve this. Well, that one is only solving it's not going to the root. For me, if I was these elected leaders, I would deal with the issues that would stop this protest. Deal with the issues that will stop Gen Zs coming into the streets. These Kenyans do not like coming to the street. They want to go on work. They want to do their business. They don't like doing it. So as elected leaders, we elect you to go and solve these issues. But when the solution that you're coming up with is just a solution that seems to perpetuate, because what Esther Perez was trying to do is perpetuate protests, so that they keep on protesting. No, we want the legislators, because they're in charge of oversight, they're in charge of the finances. Let them come up with the issues, solutions that create jobs, solutions that protects businesses, solutions that trains the police, give more money to the police. I would want more money into the pockets of the police, so that the police are able to exercise their job with restraint. You get my point? Buy for them gear that has, for example, cameras, so that and protective gear, so that they can be able to deal with these with these protests. But you see, the members of parliament are not doing that. They're coming up with solutions that are not working, that are again failing the whole thing. So for me, this is my problem. For us to harness these gains, let the elected leaders do their job. You have been elected there for a reason. And if you cannot do that job of representing and advising the other arms of government, then get out of the way. You get my point? So this is, for me, that is the main thing. And another thing for me, I know that this president, the president has, because he's managing this issue, and last year he managed it quite well. He managed it quite well by getting rid of the cabinet, by inviting the Gen Zs for a discussion. So my advice would be, the president needs to continue listening to the people. These are his kids. The president has Gen Z children. I have Gen Z children. All of us have Gen Z children. These are our kids. They're not going away anywhere soon. So we have to come up with solutions that invite these people to the table. Let's have a discussion, with them, and let them see the bigger picture. Once these young people see the bigger picture, and you are able to grow the economy where they can get jobs, where they can get busy creating, or doing their businesses, I can tell you, they will not have a reason to go to the streets.
But who is there to teach them? Because the civic education that is supposed to be given to teach them the democratic processes of building a nation is what probably is lacking. Someone finishes Form 4 or campus, and they're left to go out there to the universe. And after that, what now happens?
I think we need to start with the family.
Yeah.
Yes, the family. All of us need to talk to our kids. I left my Gen Zs in the house. I told them, stay in the house. You understand? And I expect, as a parent, that they will listen to me. So all Kenyan parents have a responsibility. If your kids have no compelling reason to go out in the streets today, you have a reason. If you leave your kids to go, ask them, why are you going to the street, and how is it going to solve the issue? I know that, what they had last week was the 25th, commemoration of the 25th June. But Saba is a different issue. It's a completely different issue. And Raila Odinga said he wants to they go to Kamukunji. You understand? So they have no reason, basically, to, again, use Saba as another, already their voices were heard on 25th.
Yeah. So
let's give the government a chance to deal with the issues that they have raised. The killing of Alberto Juang, I'm sure it is being handled by IPOA. And the extrajudicial killings. I think the government needs to deal with these issues, and I'm sure something is being done. And that's why we have this institution in place. There's something in politics called political equilibrium. That in a society, you will never have everything that you want, that there will always be challenges.
Yeah.
But the reason we have this institution, the reason we have parliament, the reason we have leaders like Alai, is because they are there to deal with these issues. So let's give them a chance to deal with these issues. Okay. And if they fail to deal with the issues, then we can come back and say, you failed to do with these issues, and so we are going to do this again.
Great. Robert, when you listen to the two gentlemen, and of course this one also goes back to you, DG, the effective and efficient institutions that entrusted by the Constitution or Wanjiku has given the mandate to articulate some of these legislations on their behalf, do you think you're doing your best?
I think we're doing our best. And I think that the challenge now is not that the politicians are not listening, because we are all politicians, the governors, the president, the MPs, the MCAs, and so on, the senators and so on. We are all politicians. I don't think that we are not listening. The challenge is that we have made protest very cool.
Okay.
It is very cool now. It is, and it's very commercially available. If you saw the figures last year, and it's available online from the donors themselves, that in a period of 4 months pre the June 25th, 2024 protest, the country received to the civil society $2.3 million. It is not a joke. That is not a joke. It's a lot of money for a protest. And if you see now, tell me, in all this clamor, and in fact the leadership, Boniface Mwangi and so on and others, have come out and say that, you know, they are the leaders of the protest. How are they leaders and they're not Gen Zs? Because I thought this is a Gen Z protest. How are they leaders? And you know, we need to ask hard questions to these people. We are pushing the president to the wall. He is the only person. It's like no MP is being asked this question. It's like no MC. In fact, I want some of the questions to come to me in regards to Nairobi and so on. I want some of the questions to go to others so that we also devolve the questions.
Yeah.
You see? But the challenge now is that the protests are very cool. So the activists have hijacked it. And everybody who wants to be a political leader now finds it is very easy to go with the Gen Z and be popular without articulating any issue, any policy, any reform, any kind of development you want to put across in the society. Some of them are going to be only popular just because, you know, what you are going to develop here is a cult of personalities.
Yeah.
So now we have two personalities. We have the president and we have Gachagua here. Some of the people are going to be elected just because they attacked Ruto. Some of the people are going to be elected just because they supported Ruto. And you have to go, the moment that these people get into the office, you're going to have another challenge because they got into office not because they could perform anything, but because they hated or supported Ruto, because they hated or supported Gachagua. The protests are a big menace to this country. And I think that what Pasari is doing, the matter might be wrong, but we need to limit whatever we can. You know, not everything is good without a limit. Even if you drink too much water, at some point, it is going to hurt you. Even if you drink too much alcohol, it is going to hurt you. But, you know, we need to consume something in moderation.
Yeah.
If the protest, if the freedoms are going to be hurting us, then the country needs to find ways of moderating the freedoms in such a way that the society can, and that's why I say that the Kenyan kind of situation is that, because now we have an amalgamation of the American and the British system of governance, you know, and the Kenyan kind of freedoms you enjoy, some of them, even the US does not. In the US, they hunted all the January 6th protesters, including the ones who came to Kenya. The Birmingham riots in the UK, everybody was hunted. Tell me one single person who has been jailed for the destruction at City Hall, for the destruction of Supreme Court last year, destruction at Parliament. Nobody is being held to account. I think it's very challenging that we have intimidated the police, that now the coolest thing is that a police officer coming to on camera and saying that mimi na support Gen Z. Because the work of the police is to stand between us and the bad guys.
The referee.
It is not a PR job. It's not a beauty contest. The police, they have been given. And you know, when police kill, we need to ask ourselves that what do we need to do to the police officers? When a police officer leaves the central police station armed with a gun. So if you get a situation where the only thing they needed to have done is to whip somebody and you've given him a gun, and he doesn't have a whip. The gun itself is a very heavy one, AK-47 or a G3. You see, I think that we need to ask ourselves, the leaders who are coming in now, we need to ask ourselves that if you check on the New York and the Dubai and London and so on, you see modern cities, they are having a police officer wearing an urban belt. This urban belt has a whip, has a taser, has a pepper spray, has a handcuff, but police, somebody leaves the police station carrying a gun. Then you ask them, you tell them they see a criminal who is violent, they need to clap for them. You know, I think that we need to ask ourselves very hard questions. Some of them, we are blaming the wrong officers. And the biggest menace we are going to see today, the first victims...
Say God forbid.
God forbid. The first victims, in case this kind of, revolutionaries and Gen Zs get to the first victims of the people who are leading the protest are going the people who are cheering them on.
Let's take a break. I want to serve you tea, Robert. You talked of moderation.
Yeah.
Let's talk with moderation. That is called Aristotle's rule of golden mean.
Yes.
That everything we do, we must do with moderation.
Yes.
So let's also debate with moderation. I want to serve you tea.
Asante
That's a
sana.
good one.
Thank you, sir. That's
Right
very
back.
good.
Very nice. Right. Okay. Welcome back.
And he thinks Kiambu.
Okay, we're just having, it's coffee time. Gentlemen, karibuni sana.
Asante.
Okay, so let's discuss this now. Let's talk about governance and democracy. DG, how do you distinguish the two? Governance and democracy. Then now we can break it down on how we can strengthen the two.
Yes, Victor. You know, the thing is that these are two terms we actually confuse.
Yes.
Even before democracy, we had some form of governance, you know, whatever form you call it, dictatorship or whatever.
That was form of governance.
Yes, yes. So with these movements and these reforms, agitation for reforms, we have gained some serious political space.
Yeah.
Got very good in terms of comparison to many other countries, got some space in terms of democracy. Now, this democracy comes with responsibility. It's not just I hand you something and it is all free. Like Robert has said, some people, while you exercise your democratic rights, you must also know that it comes with responsibility and that you have to act within certain limits.
Yeah.
And actually, that's where we are stretching in this country, unfortunately. We have said that we have given people an opportunity to protest peacefully. Now you go out and you vandalize properties and kill people. That is not democracy. That's not democracy. So what does the government have to do? As for the government, our response to protests and even these violent riots should not be the same way we responded to them during pre-democracy periods, because that's exactly what we're doing. What we're doing is that we're responding with brutality, with strength, with power. That should not be the case. What we need to do, our response has to be to respond to some of the key issues that these people are raising, the good protesters. So now we have good protesters and bad protesters. And that you should know, and you should know the difference. And the government also knows the difference. So we have to respond to the issues that are being raised by the good protesters, so to speak. And some of them are very genuine, and they are very real, and they are facing Kenyans. The other guys are just out there to destroy properties and to fight the government in very ungodly ways.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean they're also fighting the public, because the properties are being destroyed are businesses. Yesterday, I was in town, Mamangina Street, and all the businesses brought in welders, you know, to lock.
As we strengthen our democracy,
Yes.
they're strengthening their security.
Yes, it is strengthening their security. So this is the kind of democratic space that we have to work with certain amount of responsibility and limitations. You see, they say a right is only a right until you don't infringe on the right of somebody else, right? So I can say, I can't go out and insult you and say, oh, I have freedom of speech. That's not freedom of speech. So I think that is where we need to really look at. Kenya is a very interesting country. You know, in a way, sometimes I tend to really love how far we have come. The other day in the Gen Z protest, the most recent one, the commemoration of the 25th, there was a young man who was among the protesters, you know, carrying his whatever, shouting and all that. And then one of the police pushing him back was his mother. You know, I don't know if any one of you saw that. And that was really very interesting. So they came together, they shook hands, and, you know, they separated ways. And so in terms of the police, really the people, in my opinion, to be very fair and just, Victor, the people who are really put between a hard place and a rock are the police force. We always say police brutality, the most corrupt institution. No? All these things as a result of the way we manage our police force. And part of the reason is because, number one, their remuneration in terms of what they get as money is pathetic. So the only option is to sustain their lifestyle and their families is to do certain things. I am not by all means endorsing that, but the government has to look at how can we put more money into the pockets of the police in addition to giving them protective gear that they can use. The other thing is we have created institutions, oversight institutions, and we have made the oversight institutions also toothless. What will IPOA do in Kenya's protest today? They're irrelevant. They can't prosecute anybody. They can't take any case to conclusion completely. So what needs to be done is that we don't only project the police as the enemy of the people, and that's what Kenyans are really doing. And the police culture also has to change within the police structures. Yeah. But we have to sell this narrative. As we continue to change the culture within the police force, we also have to sell this narrative, and it must be seen from the practice of the police, that the police are in fact a friend to the people, not the enemies of the people. You will see young men, playing football, and they see one or two policemen appearing on the side, and they all, quit the field. They run away because they think these guys, the natural response is that they will be beaten up by the police. So what we need to do as a nation is we need to focus on the way police interacts with the community. And that's also some form of democratic space, so that people can work hand in hand with the police and our forces in general. But for me is that we cannot respond to the calls and the needs of the protesters with flooding police force on the streets. We must respond to them by being responsive to the specific issues they're raising, while we, as a government, as you said, governance, we still have control over how things are run in the country.
Yeah, that was also part of Maraga report, which actually recommended a 40% salary increment to the police, prison, and NYS officers. That is he was given a task force. He had a task force. So the question is the implementation bit of it. I think that's quite pertinent. But then, Daniel, part of it, also from your own understanding, democracy and governance, the space we are in right now, there must be a very thin line.
Absolutely.
Right.
There's a thin line. And usually, and our politics, our politicians are always the same. And, I also tried running for politics in 2019. So usually when you are from the outside...
How was it?
When you're from the outside, when you are from the opposition, you try to, talk about democracy, you talk about, you want to safeguard some of those freedoms. The way, for example, right now, you give us an example, Gachagua, the former deputy president, when he was the deputy president and protests were going on, he woke up very early. He went to the office and he was planning how to deal with the protesters. You understand? Yeah. But now he's outside there, and you can see he's now talking the voice of the protesters. And that's unfortunately our politicians right now, and we are now, the election for 2027 has started, campaigns. And so it is difficult to know who are the genuine protesters, who are the Gen Zs. Yeah. Because the politicians have now infiltrated the Gen Z protest. I see some of when I was watching the news, I could see some of the politicians were wearing the Gen Z flags. You get my point? So it is really, really difficult. And that's why I basically say it's a thin line. I agree with you, it's a thin line. And something also must tell you, Victor, is that our constitution, 2010 constitution, which we all praise is a good constitution, actually ushered in a lot of civic liberties, so a lot of freedoms that came in. Even right now, the freedom that we have to protest, during the Moi regime, before that, for you to have a protest, you had to get a permission from the DC, and you have to, basically be shown where you are going. So some of the things Esther Pasa is trying to bring were actually there before this constitution. So this constitution ushered in a lot of liberties.
Some would argue that times have changed.
Yes. And so and the constitution also came with something very important, which is chapter 6 of the constitution, which is about ethics and values. You understand? Yeah. And this chapter 6 applies to everyone, the leaders and even the protesters. So for example, when you're protesting there and I come in and I want to drive through and you are burning tires on the streets. Is that really value? Is that ethical? Am I the one you are protesting against? So even the protesters, as you protest, you must do it with civility, with ethics, with values, so that we believe that you're actually fighting for something. But if you are the one going to rob, you're breaking into a shop, then you are also breaking the Constitution, because the Constitution says everything we do must be within the Chapter 6 of leadership and integrity. So integrity should apply to everyone, and for the politicians also. Those who are buying goons. Yesterday, it was very sad. I saw some goons went to Kenya Human Rights Commission.
Yeah.
Masked, and they tried to, basically they harassed them, and you can't do that, and again, it's a thin line. You don't know in this confused environment. You don't know who is doing what. We don't know who is a goon. You don't know who is, and so I think we are living at a very, 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 very crucial time. Yeah. And just like Lai said, and he said, we must do all these things with moderation. We must guard against going into anarchy. You get my point? We can never allow Kenya to go into anarchy. We will never allow it, because we cannot. We are seeing what's going on in the Sudan. We are seeing what's going on in the neighborhood. So as you demonstrate, I would like that the police give the protesters protection as they demonstrate. They're doing it peacefully. Yeah. But the demonstrators, please, I don't want to see you looting. I don't want to see you burning shops. I don't want to see you beating innocent people. Yesterday, the Minister for Public Service says people must go to work. Allow other people to go to work as you demonstrate, so that we do it with civility. You get my point? Because if we don't do it with civility, then we give the police an excuse to come in and do something about it. Yeah. And lastly, Victor, the police, like he said, I think sometimes the politicians have made this problem, the protest, be a battle between the police and the Gen Zs. You understand? I want to say that it is not. It should not be. And the police should not also take sides. The police, just like the government, should not take sides. Let them do their job. Let them protect lives. Let them protect, property. If we could have many of the police, in town, ensuring that nobody is breaking into businesses. Like, I'm very, very sad, like what the county government had done, the new dustbins that were banned. That was very sad, and I agree with the lie.
So beautiful, by the way.
Yeah, they were beautiful. That is my money. That is our money that is being banned. You know my point? So let the police protect those properties and do it with moderation. The young people, you do it, but do it with moderation. Because if you don't do it with moderation, that's why Esther Passaris is coming up with this bill. So if we don't do it with moderation, then we will go back to the medieval ages where we were not allowed to do it. Yeah.
Okay. There's something called economic sabotage, gentlemen. We all know it. And if you're caught vandalizing something, that's why you'll be taken to court even if you're found vandalizing a street light, a guardrail or something. That's economic sabotage. So you can imagine bringing down someone's livelihood worth 2 million, 1 million shillings. Recovery is always very painful. Yeah. Let's talk about the plan of action, even as we're now trying to wind up now. What could be the plan of action, Robert, that even as we mark this particular day, let's not forget what happened in the yesteryears. If the likes of Martin Shikuku were to wake up today, the likes of Achingo Neko, the likes of Jaramogi and all that, if they were to wake up today on this 7th of Monday, what do you think they would say as far as this is concerned?
I think that they would be very impressed where we have come to, but also they'll be very disappointed on where we are going, because I don't think that is fair. I think that, especially in the capital city here, because the protests, you saw what the police was doing last night. Yeah. The protests, the people are coming from Diani, were being blocked from getting to Nairobi, and I think that it's because of the intelligence which they might have had that it was linked to the Sabasaba protests, and you could see that why is it very profitable or very cool? Because we have devolved Why don't you protest in Diani if you live in Diani? Why don't you protest in Kisumu if you live in Kisumu? Everybody protest Kwao. You see, why don't we devolve protest? Because I believe that at some point we need to think of the activism as part of the vice economy with the stricter regulation.
Yeah.
Because it's now building the activism, it's building the civil society, but it's causing massive losses. I think we recorded around 23 traders who lost 3 million and above in stock in the last protest on 25th. And this is around bus station and OTC and so on. And you could see the pain of these young people. And now you even say that the government is hiring goons. If you go to Lodole Avenue today, Kimathi Street, Luguli Avenue, Tomboya, most of the shops, the phone shops and the computer shops there, they are being run by the Somali community.
Yeah.
If you attack 10 shops and they all belong to the Somali community, what would run into the minds of the Somalis? That we are being targeted. Even if you are not being targeted, because they have dominated this economic space.
Yeah.
You see, they are controlling the supply chain and they know how to get these things in affordable, and Kenyans like it that way. They're getting it now cheaper than the Indians in Parkland and so on, and they're buying from them. And you attack those shops because the electronic shops are targeted because phones are easier to sell. Computers are easier to sell. So these young protesters, when they come to the city, they're looking for something to get away with. And you attack those shops. This Somali community, these young entrepreneurs from the community, will, the next time they see a protest, hire their own machinery.
Yeah.
Because the police has put an outer cordon out of the city, but they're not working in the CBD. Yeah, because also our policing ratio is still the gap there is a bit huge. So when that happens and you see people walking with the rungus, people assume that the government has hired goons, but actually businessmen are coming to us. I think that the last time when I talked to Dominic, in fact there's a building there called Avenue House. Those businessmen all hired people to protect their businesses, because the police was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You remember the police at some point had to go to reinforce those who wanted to get into State House. They had to go to Ngara. You know, this, and also mobility of the police. I think there's a challenge in acquiring police vehicles for sometimes now. I think that mobility has been a challenge, so they could not be able to cover both spaces in a good time. When these things are happening, and it's happening in the CBD, I think we are going to blame everybody else, but we need to realize that whatever, because you have demonstrated, I think it started with Albert Ojwang for this year, the major one, we did 25th. Today, are we going to demonstrate every week? So that we know that kuna siku, we reserve a day for demonstrations. Itakuwa 8 pia, itakuwa 9, itakuwa 10. Yeah. So it's not fair to this country. It's not fair for the development of this country. It's a very young country. And the very young country doesn't need too much politics, doesn't need too much activism. And I think at some point, if we are demonstrating against politicians, we have to sometimes demonstrate against the activists.
All right. I want to take a quick break. But before we do that, when you take a break, when you come back, is that popular segment, How to Make Kenya Great. But then, Daniel, in 2 minutes. So if the older generation were to wake up today, again, the same question, what do you think they would speak? I don't know whether they would have the same vehicle, Robert, which was it called? That was it a Datsun or something?
A Datsun.
You can imagine them driving to Kamkunji today. What do you think would run through their mind based on what they fought for?
I think the older generation, if they wake up today, they will, they will appreciate the gains that we have. Some of the freedoms we take for granted today were not, availed to them. They never had those freedoms.
Yeah.
And so they will, they will be, of course, be proud of the gains that we have today, but of course be disappointed by, just like I told you, some of these gains, some of these democratic gains are fragile. They'll be disappointed by the mistakes sometimes we make, and that will threaten the gains that where we've come from. And just like we said earlier on, Kenya has been peaceful. Even after last year's Gen Zs, we didn't have a lot of problems. But then a small mistake like this, like a killing of Albert Ojwang in a police station, which was done by some rogue police. now gives the whole country a problem. Even the president, even the president criticized that, condemned it. Everyone condemned it. So we must appreciate, and when they wake, they will be disappointed that sometimes we don't understand where we came from. We are not doing a lot to protect the fragility, of our democracy. And so this is a lesson for all of us, all those in leadership. Anything that you do today, don't do it for now. Look at the generation. How is this going to look? You get my point. You may be thinking we are doing something to support the current government, and that same thing will bite you, when the government, because governments are there only 5 or 10 years. You get my point. So everything that we do, we should look at the motive, and the motive should be generational, in the future. You get my point. And for me, that is basically what I would say about that.
Great. Let's take a break. Let me tell you something. If you've worked hard for something, and you'll know the value of why you should keep it. So don't go out there and destroy someone's property. Let's take a break. We'll be right back with more. Stay with us.